just wanted to really quickly just welcome everyone and welcome our special guest, Hema Ramkissoon. Let's give Hema a round of applause for making some time. Anybody read the flyer that we sent out about what she's here to talk about? Building your personal brand, right? So the idea was that last week we had Russell talking about high performance teams, and today we're going to talk about personal brand because we really wanted to have a conversation with a lot of leaders in our nationally and internationally. Hema thankfully making the time to do that today on different topics. And I just wanted, she's going to give her story first, and then Kavi and I will ask a couple of questions. But I really want you guys to also feel free and feel open to ask what you want to ask as well, because Hema has shared a lot of her personal story with me and has said that she's going to be very comfortable sharing when you ask the questions as well. And I wanted to take the opportunity to really, let's glean what she really, her wisdom, because this is not somebody unknown. This is somebody who has truly built her personal brand. I don't think anybody in the room doesn't know who she is. And, that's a lesson for us all. That sometimes, I remember having a conversation with a senior Massy executive and in a training session, and he was telling some young executives, he said, guess what? You know how you get noticed? And it's important to get noticed. He said, always ask a question in the room. Put up your hand. Don't be the person silent in the room, ask a question. Be the first one to ask a question. And I thought that was such practical and valuable advice. So that's some of the stuff that I hope that, if even Hema doesn't talk to, that, you ask her and she will share some tips like that. And I think nothing is off limits. So let's welcome Hema, and we welcome Kavi after as well. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. So when Candace first invited me, I didn't realize it was such a big fancy deal with all the lights, cameras, and live audiences. So first of all, thank you for coming out. I'm a little, overwhelmed, I think, but also honored. Also, I'm going to ask your permission. Maybe 5 years ago, I could remember this entire speech and speak to you completely without notes or with the aid of technology. But with time, age, and mom brain is a real thing. So if every so often I kind of look down, please note, I'm just making sure that I keep myself on track and I don't just meander and we talk about childhood memories that really are not relevant to personal branding. It's always interesting when I get the conversation about a personal brand and what my personal brand is. And I am not a branding expert. I may sit currently in a marketing position, but building my personal brand happened, I think, by chance. I think a lot of what your personal brand is really who you are. It's what you want in life. You can fake anything you want. You can pay a stylist to dress a certain way. You can pay a photographer to position your LinkedIn profile in a certain way. And now there are teams that come with it. You can create an entire persona. And I remember telling Candace, when I was on television for a very long time, there was a huge team of people that created what you said, how you said it, who you became, and what you did. And that created the persona of Hema Ramkissoon, a TV personality. But that had to be connected to who Hema Ramkissoon was. Because if there is no direct relationship, if I didn't know who I was, then no matter all the makeup, all the hairstylists, and all the work done with the presentation, nothing would help. So I did a deep dive probably when I was about 25 in my career. So at different junctures I do it to figure out who I was. And I thought, who really am I? Like, what is my brand? I know that I'm hardworking. I know that I'm successful. I know I'm resilient, and we'll talk about all of those things. But what did I want to represent to people? I wanted to represent a truly empowered woman who proves that you can do anything. A lot of people may not know I didn't grow up in a very well-to-do family, and I'm happy for that. I am so happy for that because it teaches you resilience, but it teaches you that there's no shame when you have nothing to lose, so you ask. So you always show up first in the room. You are never afraid to ask because you don't have it. You really don't have it, so you don't know any other way. I know when Candace gave that nugget of advice when someone told her, always ask a question. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I did to build my personal brand. At the age of, I'm going to talk about 2 points in my career. So at the age of 30, I decided I wanted to be the biggest TV personality in Trinidad. I wanted to be the person that everyone looked to. I wanted to be the one that the politicians would come to if you had a story to say. So then I thought, how do I do that? How do I become that person? I had to be the most prepared. I had to be the most, I guess, outgoing, but I had to be the most relevant. You look at whatever industry you're in and you get a scorecard. What are the things that matter most to this industry? And what are the things I'm good at? The one thing that I was good at is at that time, I was the only female doing it. There was no other female in the space. There was Fazir, who also had his unique and was also a strong interviewer. But I was the only female standing up in a room of men asking questions. And that is how I started to build my brand. I understood that, okay, and then how do I build a following around that? Well, okay, I can get, so men will always come to look at whatever their wives are looking at. So I understood what mattered most to my management was the metrics on viewership. So then I had to get women to make sure and follow. And how do you do that? You be true to yourself. I figured out I am a female, so I started to build an empowered community of females. Faith is a very big part of my journey. And during our Q&A, I will talk a little bit about how I've seen God move my life from one transition to the other. But I started from church groups and temple groups, and I started from schools, and I started to build my community of women and supporters and my network from there, and getting them to support what I'm doing. You're all in a professional realm. Think about your career and where you want to go. So I told you that point where I wanted to be the most relevant interviewer. Then I knew at one point I wanted to leave television. I wanted to be relevant in the world of work. I wanted to make the transition. Well, frankly, I was tired of getting up at 3 in the morning and getting hair and makeup done. But I was sort of approaching my mid-30s, and I thought I needed to do something else with my life. And how do I make people see me as something other than a face on television? I wanted to be a corporate woman. I kind of started to look at all of the women that I thought were really killing it. At that time, it would have been Karen Darbesi, it would have been Catherine Kumar, and I reached out to them, Kiran Maraj, who were really holding their own where they were. And the first thing they said, you first have to get the paper behind your name. Go and do an MBA. And I thought, okay, I'll go do that. And I did that. I then had to start positioning myself. How do people see me outside TV? And I started to become very present at every business event. Events that I had no place being. I was at every networking event that came up. I was there because I wanted to be in the rooms with the people who made decisions about being corporate. So I got the MBA. I then started to make myself relevant in those conversations. I then started to write for the Business Guardian because as my brand, I had to pivot from being a political reporter and a political interviewer into actually doing business news and letting people see that I know what I'm talking about. But all of these things, you have to just do the research. You have to figure out where do I want to go and how do I get there? And you create that roadmap. Then there's no key to success. The key is always the same. Hard work, resilience, and knowing you can't fake it till you make it. Eventually, everybody figures it out. I hate that saying because you can only go so far. You know, there's always this meme on Facebook where the sharpest pencil would look that way because it does, and it's true. But eventually, your work speaks for itself. And you have to remember to always be prepared. So when Candace spoke about the nugget, the other day when she called, I said, give me a few minutes because I'm going into a meeting with my boss. Never walk into a meeting without knowing who's in that meeting, what you are going to talk about, what you're expected to know. And I know it's hard. I can give these formulas for success. I read a lot. And I read, oh God, it's a book by James Clear. Everyone is talking about it, Atomic Habits. Right. But it's so irrelevant to my life having a toddler. There's no morning routine. There's no 5 a.m. club. There's nothing you can do. But what you can do is create a routine which always makes you the most prepared. So my 5 a.m. is 3 a.m. in the morning. I get up and prepare for my day to make sure that I earn my keep at the table, to make sure that after the 6 months, there's going to be no question as to my relevance at the Unit Trust Corporation. And those keys are part of your personal brand. It's not just what people say, but what you do to prove that you are what people believe that you are. First impressions always last. Presenting yourself as superficial as it may seem, I know that I grew up thinking, bend your head, do your work, it's going to speak for yourself. But always dress the part. And I'm not talking about it for the woman. It does not have to be $1,000 suit or these brand names. You could have a solid, clean, crisp, well ironed, well starched shirt, well put together blazer. Go to your tailor, get it done, and for the men as well. Because the other day I was doing interviews, and it's just human nature, and it's people see through people see through all of the fluff. So people who dress nice and probably have nothing beyond that, but do your part to make sure that you enter that room as well, so you have a fighting chance, and no one is going to dismiss you. And I always tell a lot of young women, because I know some of the other staff are joining online, suits may seem very much an outdated concept, but it's still a very relevant concept, still in 2025. When you're going into a business meeting, walk into the room prepared, walk prepared mentally, physically, spiritually, know who is there, know what you're expected to speak about. As women in particular, we put a lot of emphasis on ourselves and proving ourselves. And there's no harm in that, because you know what happens? You're the first that they notice for the promotion. Always work harder, and you probably have to. I probably have worked harder than most of my peers. Even when I was on television, I joked about it. I would never get away with the things that Akash Samar would get away with. I always had to change my outfit. My hair had to always be different because someone would make a comment, whereas opposed to Robert Dumas, who wore the same blazer for an entire month and no one noticed. And I knew that because the Solomon's contract was on hold. and I thought life is so unfair, but life is unfair. But even though it's unfair, you can level the playing field by doing the things that make you better. I know when you talk about branding, the one thing that has to stand true is consistency. I always said that you can create a brand. I can come in here with my hair blown out and my makeup professionally done. But if I am not actually living the truth that I say to you, if I'm not doing the work, if I walk in here not knowing who the executives of Massy were, then something would be wrong with me and everyone would pick it up. Also make a little note to yourself, and it's something that I had to learn very hard way, I guess. Try to remember people. You move up in life by human connections. Your CV can get you into the door, but the movement is about how you make people feel and how they remember you. Take a moment. There are tricks that you can do. If somebody's wearing a peach color shirt, remember his name or associate something with his name, but remember people. And I had a boss who remembered every single person that he met. And I remember asking him how and he said he learned it. But when you do things like that, people take notes. You remember your boss, you remember the last conversation you had, you remember something about them. Make that human connection. It is the one thing that will make you stand out from everything else. And that's life. My career has taken so many deep dives, up, down, left, right. And a lot of people just know the transition from television into corporate. I was very fortunate at the time to have worked on a FIFA World Cup. And very few people know that for 4.5 years, I actually worked back and forth from New York and Zurich. And I'm going to tell you how I got that job. It is about being prepared. It is about showing up, but it's about taking chances and believing in yourself. I didn't know how many people on a football team. I probably still do not know how many people on a football team. I don't know what an offside and onside is. I don't know. But I remember Jamal Shabazz at that time. I was doing an interview with him, and he was doing some work with a community group in Mobile Laventille, and he goes, it would mean a lot to me if you came in this community and did some work. I thought, oh my God, really? But you know what? I believe, because people gave me chances, and I also believe there's no one is ever left out in life, and you should never. I always believe in opening a door. So whatever stereotypical views of the club or the community shouldn't hinder me from showing up. And I showed up, and he didn't think I was going to show up. And I hosted the event, I entertained those, and I did all of the story to 2 years after that. He was sitting on deciding in a CONCACAF committee where the FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup would take place, and it took place in Trinidad and Tobago. Fast forward to 1 month into that planning committee, they needed a female face to be attached to that campaign and to work on communications and marketing. And he said, I know the perfect person. And at 6 a.m., because of the time differences, I was on a call. They didn't have like a lot of Zoom and Teams at that time, but a ring phone in my house. My mother was so excited because she goes, you have an international call. And there was a call from Zurich, and at that time, out of taking all the controversy out, as a little girl, as at that time, 25, 26-year-old woman, Sepp Blatter, other members of the FIFA Exco, the teams of CONCACAF, they're interviewing me based on the fact that I took a chance. And I remember when he said, I put your name in, and I'm like, sure, put my name in. I wanted to say, always take a chance. When an opportunity is given to you, jump at it. Do not ever doubt yourself. But while you get there, make sure you make your mark. So I did that. So I could still get tickets up to this day. No, don't ask me for it. But when you do those things, you take a chance. I remember also then coming back to television. And there was never a time that I was out of a job at that time, because when I worked on TV, I worked harder than anyone else. I was a face on television, but I made myself work as a reporter as well. And I remember at that time, Jerry Brooks, I'd just come back to Trinidad, and I had resigned because of everything that was happening. And he said, what are you doing now? And I said, well, I'm actually now back in Trinidad. And the next morning, I got a call to return to CNC3. But that is because of your work ethic and what you do. And just also not being afraid to say that I'm okay and I'm looking for a job. There's no shame in doing that. I was giving Candace a story about me returning to UTC. So now, I don't know if my bosses will see this. When I was looking, it was very difficult because after leaving Angostura, I went to Guyana, and then I had an unexpected blessing of having my son. So my life changed drastically. I came back to Trinidad, and I was having a very difficult time getting a job. And everyone under the sun would say, but you're Hema Ramkissoon, you could get a job in the morning. Don't worry, just pick up the phone. Well, that was not happening. It took me a year to find a job. And I went to every chamber, every business event. I tried what I did before. This time it didn't work. It really had no effect. All it was tiring me out because my baby was getting up 3 times in the night. I'm exhausted, negotiating between the babysitter, my mother-in-law, and his father to kind of get that middle ground. But what I did at that time was just lean into myself and lean into God and pray. I really just prayed for something to open up and to know. But I also used the opportunity to do a lot of courses online, to go on LinkedIn, to go on all of these sites that offer these professional development courses. I went to Lockjack and did more professional courses because I thought, you know what, I seem to be being positioned in this role of marketing interviews all the time. Let me have more people to support my marketing elements of it. So I did digital marketing, I did AI, I did everything that made me relevant in the conversation. Fast forward, I got a call that I was shortlisted at Unitrust Corporation. And I remember my husband joking and saying, do they know you can't count? And I said, well, they'll think I'm not really going to give financial advice. But my point of giving that joke is that I took a chance on myself, and just continue taking chances on yourself. I did everything that I could do. I learned everything I could learn about the world of finance. I still don't know it, trust me, and I probably can't give you the best advice on it. But just continue to make yourself relevant. When you talk about personal branding, it's really about just building yourself. It is about making yourself better. But you can only do that if you sit down and you do a deep dive in really who you are. What do you want to achieve? What is missing in my personality, and how do I get there? And sometimes sometimes doing a brand audit on yourself is not a nice thing. I remember there was a time a friend did it on me, and she said, everyone thinks you're full of yourself. I thought, me? I'm so humble. How could that be? But these things also bring you back into perspective. Life does humble you a lot. And when I talk about my faith, I talk about God moving me from one place to another. But you have to sit down and figure out what's important to you. But when you talk about your personal brand, I would say the key to building your brand is building who you are as a person and going on a self-development quest. On a very practical level, if you want to move somewhere, in building your personal brand, in this world of the digital age, LinkedIn is super important. You have to make sure. A lot of times we're afraid to share ourselves on. Trinidad and Tobago culture teaches you to be humble and beat humility, and there's no wrong in that. I think humility is probably one of the greatest graces that I pray for every day. But don't be afraid to say what you've done. Don't be afraid to put your stories out there and to build your brand, because that's where the world is looking now. On a very other practical level, social media is very unforgiving. Don't put something out there that you don't want your children to not see in 5 years. Don't vent your personal life on it. I know these are very silly things to say, but there are things that sometimes we all need to be reminded. I remember even when there was the controversy with Terrence and his wife. I thought it was so funny that everybody was jumping on this bandwagon. And I shared something, and a man's group called me and said, I cannot believe you used your platform to share this. And it was so, and then I realized, I still have a lot. I always have to do a check on these things, because things that we think people don't notice, they do notice. And you're all employees as well. And while there is a social media policy that you will be guided by your own policy as well. Is this aligned to the person I want to be? Is this person online reflective of who I want my children to look up to? So build your brand on your digital networks. I would encourage everyone to populate your LinkedIn, to get a professional photo shoot done. It's worth the investment. Invest in a proper suit. Speaking your story is what is going to differentiate you. Candice gave a story about talking up in meetings. Learn to present. It is a skill that differentiates me in every single meeting. Do you know why I'm valuable at UTC? I always joke. Because I'm blessed in a way that finance is a very conservative world. Nobody cares to sit and speak. So every public speaking event that the ED gets invited to, guess who they throw it to? Me. But that was my strength. I can't count, but I could present. And God, do I present. But I'm making light of it, but figure out what you're good at and just build on that. Bring that to your organization, but also know if you're in a practical setting, know all that is happening in your meeting, but know how to present your ideas. If you need help doing it, and you don't I always tell everybody, this modern age, you don't need to go into an institution. YouTube it. YouTube has so many self-help videos. There are videos that even I do. I learned how to run meetings strategically through TikTok and LinkedIn, and there's no harm in saying that, because we're in a world of information. Do all of the things that you know will make you better. If those are the gaps that you think inhibit you from being noticed in a meeting or from moving up, build on it. Find the information. I want to also say that it may sound very trivial, but find a group of people, of like-minded people, who support you, not just at your home life, but professionally as well. Even if you feel very out of place and you are the weakest link, just by being around them, it will strengthen you. I remember going to AmCham's Women's Conference every year and thinking, God, this is such a big investment of my money every year. But do you know what? I was able to sit and have conversations with women who I never would probably meet. And just by being there, they noticed me. So when I was looking for jobs, or when I would go to places, they would say, oh, I met this girl and I think she's looking for a place. And it so happened when I got the job at UTC, 2 of the women who sat on the panel were women who I met and interacted with at some of these events. Find yourself in groups where you know they will continue to push you and you learn from. I know I've been speaking for a while, and I can't speak for long times without being interrupted, but I don't want this to be a monologue. It really is, and I tried to tie some personal and practical tips into it, but to just tell you to never say no to an opportunity. If you know you want career growth, I have moved in careers that I also worked in cricket as an advisor to CPL, and I still don't know what a leg side is, and I still don't know what anything is. But you know what? I was like, sure, because I could put on my CV, I executed regional CSRs for the CPL. And those things, believe in yourself. Because I didn't have to really go on the field to do anything, right? I just needed to know what we're doing, how we're doing it, and figure out how the parts work. Just keep pushing yourself and making transitions. If that's what you want to do it. I have gone from football to cricket to food and beverage, selling alcohol, and I don't even drink, to now doing the world of finance. And all have been rewarding so far. Okay.
Thank you, Hema. We're going to do a little switcheroo. So I'm going to ask Kavi to come and sit here, and I'm going to sit next to you because we both have questions.
Thanks, Candice. Sorry for being late. Welcome, Hema. Really, really happy to be here. in listening to this story, I think there were a couple of things for me that stood out. But I wanted to ask a question about. There's a direct correlation for me between communication and influence. If you had to give us some tips on how to be a more effective communicator, what would you say to that?
Communication is really the key to selling yourself. And I made the point about how you distinguish yourself. Know your audience. Always know your audience. Know your material. Let me give a couple things quickly. On a very practical, theoretical level, Trinis speak very quickly. Slow your pace down. And if you are someone who speaks very quickly when you get nervous, read in front of a mirror. And I know that may seem very benign and very simplistic, but it will help you to hear how you sound and make you become very comfortable with hearing the voice, the sound of your voice, because many people are not. I am trained to do that, so I'm comfortable hearing but you see people in meetings in the most senior executive positions crumble when they speak in meetings, and that will distinguish you. Get comfortable being comfortable saying things out loud. Know your audience. Figure out who you're speaking to. Figure out the level of jargon needed. Jargon is always a bad idea, but just figure out the level of technicality needed. When you understand who sits in the room, understand what matters to them. So if you know you're doing a presentation to a board, then you know the strategic plan is important. What am I presenting to them, and how is this going? What matters to them most? What do they want to hear? And what do I want to say? Try to make that marry in the middle. So I'm currently teaching my team to write board notes. And the one thing I would always say, think about everything like an inverted pyramid. The most important things I want to say in my introduction. What am I trying? So there's a quick rule when you write: who, what, why, when, where, how. Always try to answer that as succinctly as you can. Be comfortable speaking, know your audience, know what you are trying to say, but understand how does that appeal to them. So if I'm trying to get Candace to approve a marketing campaign, how does this tie into Massy's goals? How does this make Massy seem better? How does it differentiate her? Figure out how am I making that middle point. The other thing as well is not only understanding your audience, you have to understand your material. You have to understand what it is you're saying, understand the topic, and ask 5 or 6 questions to myself. What is this? Why is this important? Who is this important to? Does this make an impact? What am I missing here? Those are the things that you always think about when you're communicating. But the most important thing is to know your audience. Who am I speaking to? How do I convince them? On a practical level, understand your tone, always keep your composure, understand the volume that you use as well. Don't eat up your words. Trinis tend to do that as well when we speak, because we sing song a lot. And I only became very aware of that when I worked in football, when no one could understand my accent, because we tend to drop words very quickly, we muffle everything in. But communication is really influence. If you cannot communicate effectively, then you cannot get anything done. When you to your team as well, understanding, you may think people understand. I always say feedback is so important. It may seem very simplistic to say, but I always end meetings, not in a dictatorial way, but you always, just to be clear, or let's just kind of reassess the points again one more time, but feedback is very important. Even if you're communicating to a team member, to a higher level or to a lower level, get a feedback loop into whatever you're doing. Because communicating, as easy as it may seem, it is the most difficult thing, because people perceive things, whether they don't like you, they don't like the project, they may interpret it differently. So always remember what you're trying to say, how you're going to achieve it, but establish a feedback loop.
I think what the underlying thing for me here is preparedness. It seems that you are very, very prepared. And I'm listening to the story. You said that your day starts at 3 a.m. So I guess one way to put it would be that in order to effectively communicate, you need to be prepared for the communications that you're going to have, right? Yeah. Another question I wanted to ask would be, we live in a world, for me, where sales or finding salespeople who are very great is a limited talent pool. building your personal brand, there's a connection there between selling your brand to the world. How I know you would have given some ways to really increase your brand presence, but what for you would be the most important thing, like out of all the advice that you would give?
I think it's knowing what my strengths are. So I'm comfortable speaking to people and networking. And that was my differentiate. It's similar to sales. What makes you better than everyone else in the room? What makes your product better than anyone else in the room? What makes it better? And always attaching your story. I genuinely can empathize when I do interviews, and that was the cutting edge or the edge that I had in my competition, because again, we were all in a space of very hard cutting interviews. But as a female, you do have the ability to be empathetic and compassionate. Those things also differentiated me from everyone else. So if you ask, how do you get it? Figure out what you're good at. If you are a compassionate person, then you know where to position that salesperson. If you are black and white, then put them somewhere else. But it is all about understanding what makes you stronger than everyone else.
Candace, you.
I have one question. Mine is a little not on personal brand. Who was the most interesting person you interviewed?
Believe it or not, it's Basti Pandey. I've interviewed amazing people. He's no longer with us, but he was the most difficult interview you could ever have in life. He never answered a question. Never your question. He always answered his question.
Funny, our CEO shares his last name.
No relation.
And my other question to your networking and mentorship conversation, you were just sharing about networking, and I think building a personal brand, you've really emphasized about being in the right spaces with the right people. What about mentorship though? Like, have you also developed those types of relationships?
I have, and mentorship is, every time you hear the word, people think it's a very formalized agreement that it has to be someone super successful or sort of in the Who's Who magazine. I have a lot of women that I lean on, but I also lean on my pastor. I also lean on a pundit. Mentorship is anyone that can really give you a reality check. So I have women that I lean on when I need career advice, who emulate the kind of success stories that I want. But you also have mentorship in people who bring you back. So when I face tough situations and maybe I'm not as tempered as I should be, I get those reality checks from the pastor or the pundit. But there really has to be someone who guides you, who makes you a better version of yourself. And it is important to have those people who are outside your everyday realm, who really can give you independent advice. And sometimes it's tough advice, but sometimes advice that you needed. But I always say that I would not have achieved what I have achieved in this life had it not been for some phenomenal women who took me under their wing, guided my career path, and kept encouraging me. I mean, I made the joke about taking a very long time to find a job. And I remember being so irritated because these women have the power to pick up the phone and say, give her a job. But they also understood that I had to learn resilience. I had to reskill myself to become more relevant and also to earn my keep. So even in the rejection, there's blessing, but I understood their mentorship at that time was tough love, but I needed it. And that's when I say, always find people who you look up to, but who will always give you that one step ahead that you need.
I love that. My other question is around, you talk a lot about continuous improvement and learning. What would you say was perhaps the single most important course, program, leveling up that you did in terms of all your span of learning?
I think right now, in the world that I sit in, I think artificial intelligence is super important. So I did an introductory course through LinkedIn, and I think of everything that I've done in the last, that and emotional intelligence. So let me put them, so artificial intelligence and emotional intelligence, because I do want to tell you, and they both are important for very different reasons. One is to make you industry relevant, but the other is to make you people relevant, because as much as the world is changing, as long as you cannot connect with people and motivate them to get the needle moving, nothing can move. and emotional intelligence, which is a course I also did, but I still do a lot of reading on it. I would rate both as equally important, because one was needed to advance, but the other, you need to advance your team, and you need to also advance yourself. And once you can connect emotionally and communicate with emotional intelligence, you would change the entire world, trust me, because you deal with persons of every walk of life. When people walk into that office door, they walk with their whole family baggage, they walk with their upbringing, their morning routine, and the 2 hours in traffic. So you have to figure out how you dissect all of that to say, thanks, I hear you, but let's get the job done. But you have to say it in a way that everyone feels appreciated, and it makes you. So those two, I think, are the most important. And they had the most impactful change in my life.
What I'm also hearing here is a roadmap for success. And there's nuggets all over this conversation about how to be successful. You use a great word, a word that we use all the time here, about resilience. I'm also hearing tenacity, and you going all over to these events, the chamber, meeting people, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, continuous learning. I think you all just discussed that. Those things sometimes seem so basic, almost common sense, but we overlook it.
We do.
We look for the magic bullet, the silver bullet, that one thing that's going to get successful, not realizing that it's these simple, basic steps day in, day out. So it's not necessarily a question, but just a highlight, hearing your story and seeing your success, and just knowing that it was these simple, basic steps that you put on repeat over and over.
And it's interesting because the old rules still apply. Working hard, integrity, what you stand for, the person that you are in front of the mirror must be the same person that you are when you stand outside in a group of people. They are so old, but they still are true and proven. And nothing beats hard work. Nothing beats humility in knowing your success story. And the resilience really, people still highlight the fanciness. So if you go on my Instagram, you see all the nice pictures of me, my son, and all the nice things. You won't see me literally on the verge of going crazy. You also see the moments, but there are so many times in my life where I have questioned decisions. There are so many times in my careers where I've been hauled in for meetings and you lead teams, so you're held accountable for things that are not your fault, but in the grand scheme of the organizational chart, it happened under your watch, so you are the one. But those things build character. I always say that even though things may seem difficult, every rejection is a blessing. I've worked in places which truly shaped who I am now, that you could come at me with anything and I'm like, I have seen that before. We're not going down this road. I could read every type of personality because I've lived it. And at the time you feel like you're drowning, you feel attacked, but remember that you are learning. And always, the one thing I want to say, learn to depersonalize, learn to learn from it. What do I learn from this person? What has it taught me about myself? Because you're going to keep getting the same character on your team until you learn to address that issue.
So, depersonalize. You must have had very difficult conversations in your life. You must have interviewed very difficult people. Tell me how to manage that. Tell us how to manage difficult conversation, conflict resolution. As we hold you up to be an expert communicator. So give us some wisdom that mightn't be written in books.
It's funny, and it is. So I'll give you a couple of real life examples. In the world of social media, people cut clips without context, right? So I had done this interview with an international guest, and they had given me a script. It was, at that time, differently abled. We were talking about a topic of differently able and inclusion. And the script I followed to a T. There was no deviation. But if you cut this clip, it would have come across that I was insensitive. And this clip had gone viral. And I was like, oh my God, this is so crazy. What do I do? Come out, and how do I really not cave, go under a rock? and die, really. And I think it taught me at that time to literally, I went out and I made a script and I recorded it and put it back on social media to explain the circumstances. You have to be clear. Everything is a crisis communication when you're doing in that way. So if you're de-escalating a situation and depersonalizing, when everyone is coming at you, if you know it's going to be a tense conversation, breathe. Breathe to bring your heart rate down because you don't want to raise your voice. No matter what, once you match that energy, it's going to be an all-out argument. And I've seen things escalate into arguments which don't have to be. If you know it's going to be like that, take a breath or take a walk. It may seem easier than expected, but do it. When I say depersonalize it, if you know someone is coming at you, block it out. And I know that is difficult, but I always think, I remember when I get into a lot of tiffs with politicians, and as arrogant as this may seem, I would always think, in 5 years' time, you have to go back for your job. My job going to be here. And I would think that, and it regained power in my mind. And it may seem simple, and may seem funny, but if you mentally prepare for that battle and you equalize the playing field, then it's not a battle. You have to get mental tricks. So if someone is coming at you and you know it's going to do it, mentally level the playing field so you are able to keep calm. Because if you think it's offensive or defensive, it will then turn into a battle that you don't want. Take a deep breath, take a walk, always watch your tone. If you think your tone is escalating or it's rising, stop. You have to always, and you do that by breathing and controlling your heart rate. I have learned it's 2 breaths in and breathing out through your mouth. If you follow Andrew Huberman, there are a few tips that he will teach you on how to control your emotion in that way. But mentally, you have to level the playing field. And when you do that, it's no longer an argument.
So essentially control your emotions.
Yes.
That's the pearl of wisdom. Yeah.
And you have to do it any way you can. As I said, in my mind, I would be like, 5 years from now, you back up. I still here.
No, that's some good tips. I mean, it's something that I need to take on as well, you know. I know we probably have some audience questions, so anybody wanna kick that off?
Hi. So you spoke about networking as well as the crowd you keep. But what about having the charisma to be able to do that? Because not much people, even I struggle with that aspect of it.
It's really difficult. And I'm going to be honest with you. I have been trained for 20 plus years to be the person that I am, to be confident, to walk into a room, shake your hand and say hi. And it takes a lot of effort, but anyone can be trained to do it because you have to know that to succeed in this world, you need to I think that was intended to get the impact there, but if you do simple exercise, and it may seem simplistic, at the dinner table, start talking to everyone, and you become comfortable speaking. And when you become comfortable speaking in your own environment, it then translates. But it's something you have to work on. But you have to make an effort. It's like when I say read in front of a mirror, you have to become comfortable hearing your voice. So in the evening, make it your duty. Everyone, or even in the morning or in the lunchroom, ask everyone something. Make sure and ask every single person a question. It then makes you comfortable speaking with people, and that will build your confidence to go on. I tell everyone I was never a morning person, but somehow I became a morning person because I was trained to do it. You can build any muscle in your body. That's the most amazing thing. And the human mind, your personality, can be shifted, can be molded, into creating something. So start with those small, simple exercises, but know that it's just the world that we live in now. There's a book called Never Eat Alone, and it teaches you the impact that it's not really about who knows you. It's really not who you know, it's who knows you and who remembers those connections. And I can say it really is because of those moments of connection with people that I was able to get where I've gotten in life.
Thanks.
Josh.
Hi, Hema.
Hi.
You mentioned a lot about God and this sort of moving you from place to place, like it was divinely ordained. But then you also talk about preparedness. And I'm trying to figure out what's the formula or the balance for, or in your case, was it like calculated steps towards it, or you just threw yourself at every opportunity and then the rest was taken care of by a higher power?
So I'm going to try not to get emotional, but faith has played a big part in creating me and who I am and humbling me into who I am. But early in my career, I did have very calculated steps. I knew I wanted to be on television. I knew I wanted to be a face on TV. But somewhere along that line, there's this old saying, when you have a plan, God laughs. And that is true. What I can say is just throw yourself into every opportunity that comes. And opportunities will come that you least expect. So when I got this job at UTC, I also was in line for a communications director position. And naturally, you would think that I would gravitate more to the comms position. Well, I didn't get it. I remember thinking, I'm going to call chairman of this company and be like, this is just but I think, to answer your question, God favors those who prepare themselves. And I believe that truly. We do believe in miracles, and I believe that God, once you put it in his hands, he will take care of you, but you also have to take care of yourself. So if a door is open, like I believe a door is always open, and you're put in a room, you make the most of that room. And there's this old saying, and there's a part, I don't know what your faith is, and I'm going to paraphrase it, so please don't come for me if I get it wrong. But your name will be spoken in rooms that you only dream of. And when you work hard, that's my story. My story is really working hard and ended up in rooms. I remember when the president of Guyana, I interviewed him, and I was so prepared. This is before Irfan Ali was president. He had come to Trinidad, and he was meeting with Trinidad businessmen, and a local businessman contacted me, and he said, this man is going to be president of Guyana, you have to interview him. And he was here with Barrett Jagdew. And I was like, I'll interview Jagdew. Because, of course, my arrogance. And then God humbled me. And he said, I interviewed him, but I knew everything about Guyana. I knew everything about their history. I knew every single thing about the country. And he was so impressed because of the depth of the interview. And it so happened, God put it in a way that Barrett Jagdew had to cut the interview because at that time everyone wanted to meet with him because the presidential race hadn't started yet. So the interview I had planned for Barrett Jagdew ended up being transcribed to interview Irfan Ali. And he was like, you're really prepared for this interview. And I said, I'm always prepared. And he said, I'm going to offer you a job when I become president. And I laughed and I said, yeah, politicians make promises all the time. And I interviewed him a couple times after that. And when he became president, he offered me a job. And it gives an example, one, that faith turns things around. But I was prepared no matter what, to do an interview with the next president of Guyana.
Why didn't take it?
So I didn't take it at that time because I just signed with Angostura. But I did work for him. I stayed at Angostura close to 3 years. And then at that time, my husband was on that. So happened that I got my CPS, and they created me, and Guyana wanted to create a tour. So they needed sort of a hybrid office between CPL and them, and somehow Faith ended up that I met him at a dinner event, and he goes, what are you going now? I'm looking for a job. And I got
Which job do you prefer? So you've been on TV where most of us know you from. You have entered into the corporate space, actionable and UTC. France.
every region. I appreciate all of my experiences. I can say good, bad, or indifferent. Every single entity that I've worked for, every person that I've worked for, they've taught me and they've molded me into who I am. Some I have great memories with, and they've propelled me into others, and others have taught me a lot of introspection. But I always believe that no matter where you are, there is no good, bad, or indifferent. It's really how you make yourself as a result of it, if that makes sense.
Make plenty sense, but very political answer. So I expect you to be a politician. That's the next job you're going into, right? Any other questions? Yeah, we have another one, right?
Okay, good morning. I really enjoyed hearing your story.
Thank you.
And I just want to know, you spoke about and waking up there and I know consistency. So I just want to know what strategies you have used when figuring out, and how you develop that grit to keep going in spite of maybe not feeling actively motivated all the time.
So life turned me into the 3 a.m. human. I loved the 5 a.m. club. In fact, I was a huge Robin Sharma fanatic. I saw him when he came to Trinidad. I almost thought I would be a monk one day, and then life happens. But I'm very curious. I grew up in a very interesting dynamic because my mother at one time was very successful. But somewhere along that journey, he made a few business decisions that impacted our family and our financial well-being. So that changes you a lot because there is no fallback plan. There really is just you and that grit to survive and that grit to succeed. So I knew that I had to educate myself. I knew that I needed to do it because there was no fallback person. There is no, hey, can you pull me out? I can't make a bill. I don't know how to pay. I paid for myself through university. I paid for my master's. I just have to keep remember why I'm doing it. So initially when I was younger, it was because there was no one else. Now my motivation is I want my son to be very proud of me. I want my son to know I can do everything. But there is always a balance and there will always be burnout. And I do believe in that as a real thing. I think if you don't stop yourself, your life will stop you. So I think the year that I was pregnant and the year after was really life telling me to stop and slow down. And it was the best 2 years of my life. One, because I enjoyed it, my son, seeing him for that year. But I also was tired because I always had this need to go and go and go because I felt like I would miss out. I also felt like I was so accustomed just always being a hustler. And I using that term is very funny because people would look at me and be like, no, but it's true. When you grow up just constantly having to prove things, you have that hustler mentality. But now I make a conscious effort every day to take an hour to myself, whether that hour is in the gym, whether that hour is simply sitting in nature, or sitting by myself. The 10 seconds I get without my son attaching himself to me. But I mentally take a break because you, as a human and as a worker, having all these pressures, you are no good to anyone if your cup is empty. And that is legitimately true. And I only realized that. And you do become better when you recharge. So if you think there is a month that you are just overwhelmed, there's nothing wrong in taking a personal day to recharge, reset, and you will come back better the next day because sometimes you do need fresh eyes. It's true. It's kind of like when you're looking for something and I'm like, oh my God, I can't find it. And you walk away and you come back 2 days after and it's right there. It's a simplistic example, but it's the same thing that applies. Sometimes you need to walk away for a little while to come back even better.
Sparkle there, but just to follow up on that, and I think it's important to rejuvenate. But I also think it's important to have the discipline that if you do take time, a personal day or whatever it is, that you have the mentality to come back stronger.
You do.
And the discipline has to be there.
The discipline is really the key to success. Like everyone can start off hot and sweaty, but I talk a lot about self-discipline. I listen to podcasts all the time. It is my thing. I don't do the radio stations. I don't do even television anymore. I don't even know what's going on in the news. But discipline is the key. You have to carve things out. I am a big believer in blocking time. So when I get up at 3 in the morning, because I can give you the honest example of my day's life. I leave my office because I get to the office at probably like about 6:30. We have flexi time, so I'm home because of traffic, maybe by 4:35. At that time, I can't pick up my computer because I'm with my son. But I also know I have a responsibility to a job. I can't pick up my computer 6 o'clock the next morning when I'm in the office. So I have to have the discipline. What I miss out on the night before or what I missed out by leaving on my flexi time, I have to address between 3 and 4:30 in the morning. That is the key to success because there's no shortcuts. I mean, I've recently started back the gym and I always joke with my trainer, there really is no shortcut. You have to do the weights, you have to do the cardio, you have to eat right, you have to sleep right, you have to drink water. You miss out any of them, you're not getting into the carnival costume. The same thing is with life and success stories. It is with the motivation, it's great. I can be motivated to do anything I want to, and there are days I will have no motivation. And the days that you have no motivation, those are the days that your discipline has to kick in. And every day I block time off. I block time for my deep work in strategy. I block time if I say I'm going to finish a project. I hold myself accountable, even if it means that I have to work beyond the time or get up at 2:30 the next morning or 2 as opposed to the 3. But I get it done because I made a commitment and I hold myself accountable. If you don't hold yourself accountable, then you will not succeed.
Sparkle.
Hi, Hema.
Hi.
Nice to have you here. My question is a little personal. It is just to find out from you, being in a male-dominated industry earlier in life, did you ever face a time where you felt some level of gender discrimination, how it impacted you, and how you overcame it?
I can say that I have a real brash kind of personality, so the two things about women having to work hard is a reality of everyday our gender inequality manifesting in workspaces. And no matter what industry you're in, that is something you're going to face. But I think I felt the most when I had my son. And I was looking for a job. I was looking for a job being pregnant. And I remember people just asking me, well, who's going to take care of your child? And I thought, wow, I wonder if they ask the man next door who's taking care of his child, right? And even applying for jobs, I remember being ashamed to tell people I was pregnant. Starting a new job, I remember being asked questions, and I did about 7 interviews. I can say it and laugh about it now because it was just difficult. In fact, there was a lot of people knowing that I was the mother of a 1-year-old child, and in their mind, what does that mean? Who's going to take care of your child? Do you have a support system? When your child is unwell? There were a lot of things, and that is just a reality. And women face it, whether you have a child, whether you're taking care of your parents, because we have a lot of responsibilities. I just feel like you will end up in a space where you do find where it's not happening. So I did end up in a space where the balance is phenomenal. So I do have the option to work from home. I do have flexi time. I have the option to work from satellite offices. So you find yourself in a space where you know the non-negotiables in your life. So my non-negotiable was I knew that I wanted to always have time with my son in some way or the other. And I no longer wanted to have jobs that took me every single weekend, every single hour. And I found a space like that.
Rihanna, we have any questions online? Yeah. Spark, you just want to pass the mic over.
Okay, so the first question is, how did you get into the space where you mentally set no limits for yourself?
You know that there is no other option when you have nothing to lose anymore. So as I mentioned, I didn't grow up in conditions which will allow you to fail and have a cushion. You had to know it's either you make it or you don't. I always knew what I wanted in life. I know I like nice things, but I'm like, oh, well, there's nobody to buy that. So you better learn and do it yourself, right? So you have to develop it. You have to know what you want, and there's no other option. So I put myself, and when you have nothing to lose, I think the one thing that we do, and there's a book by Brené Brown, and it talks a lot about vulnerability and shame, right? And it still takes a lot from me because you do have shame is such an inhibiting thing. You're like, oh God, how it's going to look, what they will think about me. Nobody cares. They're not going to remember you tomorrow. They're not going to remember you. If they're a horrible human being, they may tell somebody, but that's on them and God. But just put yourself out there and know this is what I want. I remember even at the transition when I was looking for a job and I had to go back to television in sort of an interim thing. I got offered to do this show, She Says So. And I felt so ashamed because I had kind of stepped away from that, and I worked in Guyana, I worked in Angostura, I worked all these places. I felt God to go back to where I kind of came from, and there was this mental block in me. And then I thought, you know what, there's no shame in making an honest dollar. And because of that show, I was able to interact with some of the most prominent women in Trinidad and Tobago who gave my CV to a headhunter who shortlisted me for a job that was not advertised.
Thank you for that. Okay. The next thing that I have is, what top 3 things would you give as advice to someone who's trying to build their personal brand for the first time or now trying to enter a new space?
So you kind of have to first do a deep dive into who you are. What do I want my brand to be? Do I want to be a thought leader in sales or merchandising? Do I want to be, or do I just want to be, so I was a TV personality. I'll use this practical example. How did I become who I was? I had to be good at my job. That was important, so nobody would be laughing at me. But I also had to look the part. I have to understand what came with the part. So having your makeup done, having your hair done, or me learning to do those things. Presentation was a big part of the success of building my personal brand. Also documenting my stories were a big part. So I talk about LinkedIn if you're in a professional space, but at that time it was a lot of Facebook and a lot of Instagram. So I documented a lot of the stories that I did, a lot of the outreaches, because I wanted to be positioned as a personality who gave back. So I aligned myself with the Diabetes Association. I became an ambassador for them. That also enhanced my brand because I was able to attach to a network. I did a lot of public speaking. I gave back. But I had to first figure out, what do I want to be? Who am I? I know I'm hardworking. I know I'm compassionate. I know I want to be known as this. How do I get there? And what are the tools? If it is from a professional perspective, build your LinkedIn, get your professional photography done, invest in a good suit, and know the knowledge. If it is you want to build your personal brand, presentation is important, how you look, and the stories that you put out there, make it engaging. If it is you want to build on that platform, understand how algorithms work. You have to understand the space that you're in and how you really make it work for you.
Okay, thank you so much, Hema.
Thank you.
I have 2 more for you.
Sure.
What advice do you have in dealing with imposter syndrome?
I live with that every day. Like, I think it's a thing we all have. You just do it. You really just do it. I believe in the power of abundance and manifesting, and I talk to myself, as crazy as it may seem. I'm like, you get this, girl. But everybody has it, because you walk into rooms and you don't know. I walked into this room and I thought, oh my God, suppose I come here and talk absolute garbage. What are they going to think? And I still do it. I'm still sitting down here thinking that in the back of my head while I'm speaking to you. But you just have to believe that you can do it. Speak to yourself. Once you are prepared, once you know what you stand for, everyone has imposter syndrome. I tell everyone to this day, when I walk up on a stage, I still get butterflies. I don't host many things anymore, but TKR asked me to host their 10th anniversary dinner. And I remember walking and they asked me, do you want something to eat? And I thought, no, I'm going to throw up. Like, I was still so nervous, and I still get nervous, but you just go and you do it. Just do it.
Okay, thank you. You've given us some very practical tips, and you've referenced podcasts and books. Do you have any podcast recommendations?
So it depends on the stage in your life. So I can tell you, at one time I was obsessed with Robin Sharma, and I was obsessed with thinking. So I read the James Clear's book, and right now I'm obsessed with just life and balance and my health. So I'm obsessed with Andrew Huberman's podcast, but it just depends on where you are and what transition you are in your life. Currently I'm reading Don't Split the Difference, because I'm terrible at negotiations. Still to this day. So it just depends on what you are and where you are, and there will always be a best-selling book to wear. So the year that I had off, I believe if you have a lot of demons and you need to confront those, The Mountain Is You or Brené Brown's book, I would advise anybody to read that. It changes your power. I think it's called Dare. Dare, yeah.
All right, that was it for the online questions. I don't know if anybody else, I see in the audience.
Before that question comes up, I just want to double down on the book Never Split the Difference. It is a fantastic book about negotiations.
I'm now reading it.
Right? You absolutely need to read it. So just double down on that.
So now I'm going to double my reading every day.
That's Chris Voss, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, Hema.
Hi.
Massy. In such a long, where would you see yourself in the next 5 years?
I appreciate that. I really don't know. You know, when I was in media, my plan was to be the best that I was. And I made a roadmap to that. Now that I'm a mother, my life is a little different. So I think in 5 years, every job I give myself 3 years. I think after 3 years, you know whether you are adding to that job or the job is adding to you. And you do assessment as to whether this is happening. But every job that I go into, so right now I'm at UTC, I set some milestones for myself, my 90-day plan, my quick window, right? I led a team into that. But to answer your question, I want to see myself continuing to build in whatever space that I am, and for my son to be proud of me. In that way, that's really where my life is at.
Amy, you spoke about imposter syndrome, right? Again, hearing your story, I doubt that. I really doubt this imposter syndrome. And you use the word hustler.
Well, you look like a style hustler, you know? Style hustler.
Well, I just think that is a great way to be successful if you have the hustler mindset. It's just something, not a question, but just an observation. So I really doubt the imposter syndrome. I think that's what, that's the reason you're successful. And you'll probably be successful in anything that you do. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions? Candice, you do have a mic, and I know you might have had some.
We're good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure about the time.
Yeah, I think we need to wrap now. So, Hema, I want to thank you. I don't have the mic.
Well,
No,
just pass it back.
that's okay. Thank you.
So guys, in closing, just want to say thanks to him on behalf of Massy Stores and all those who tuned in online as well. We're saying thank you very much. I think my takeaway is more humble bragging on LinkedIn, and I guess for everyone as well. And, thanks so much for being so open and vulnerable with us and, answering all our questions and being a part of this. This is a big part of our journey to just find ways to develop personally and professionally, and I think you've given us some fantastic nuggets of wisdom. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.